Okay. It's just the on coming up very shortly is what they call log bomer,
Yeah.
where they light a fire.
Yes.
Different.
What is that for? I couldn't understand that holiday.
Okay, so let me make my bracha first, and then I'll be able to talk about it, okay?
Okay.
Yes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So Lag BaOmer, that's coming up very, very soon. What happened was this: the Omer period, much later on, during the days of Rabbi Akiva, became a time of semi-mourning. And the reason why is that there was a plague in Israel at that time when Rabbi Akiva lived, which of course is thousands of years after the Torah was given. And Rabbi Akiva had like 20,000 students, 2,000 students. I think it was a huge number of students. And many of those students died in this plague. And that's why this became a time of semi-mourning. And according to one tradition, on the 33rd day of the Omer, it's Lag BaOmer, 33, the plague lifted. And so that's the reason why we can have weddings on that day. That's why you don't have weddings during the Omer period, and that's the tradition, but you can on Lag BaOmer.
And get haircuts.
Yes, you can. I'm looking forward to it. I already have my appointment.
And then they say you can get haircuts from Lag BaOmer on.
Yes, there is some sort of interesting discussion as to whether or not from Rosh Chodesh, from Rosh Chodesh or from Lag BaOmer. Yes, because that's when the plague lifted on the 33rd day. The bonfires. So again, later on, maybe, but somewhat concurrently, we also have the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's this very mystical rabbi, and his son, Rabbi Eliezer, if I'm not mistaken, and how they were in a cave, and that's sort of part of this. The bonfires, I'm not certain as to the deeper meaning behind the bonfires, but my sense is that, that they represent light in darkness. That's at least, and that's my guess.
So what I'm reading right now, just from a cursory Google search, is that some say it has to symbolizes the Zohar that from Bar Yochai, the light of,
Right. Because according to tradition, he is the origin of this mystical tradition found in the Zohar. And the word Zohar means like brightness, has to do with that, has associated with light, things like that. So that's a very quick explanation of Lag BaOmer. And it's also become, recently, by the way, just recently, I discovered that it's also associated with colored eggs.
Colored eggs.
Yes, and there is a tradition of taking onions or onion skins and boiling them in water, and then putting the eggs in to boil, and the color from the onion skins becomes attached to the eggs. And of course, eggs, as we know, are a sign of mourning. It's a mourning food. It's what you have at the Shiva, hard-boiled egg. And yes, I know Golda. Golda is making a reference to Easter eggs. Who knows? It's a different tradition regarding eggs on Easter. It has a whole different tradition there. But regardless, the idea of colored eggs, I did a little bit of investigation because I was so surprised to discover this tradition. And it has to do with children. And it has to do with the fact that even though eggs are a sign of mourning, coloring the eggs is supposed to make them feel a little bit happier and a little more fun. And the kids are kept in mind for that. So that's what I discovered as far as the colored eggs are concerned. We know that eggs on Easter have a whole different relationship to fertility. That's, going back, I suspect, to pagan culture and the syncretism involved in bringing Christianity to the pagan world. So that's on that side.
Well, Chabad, it says that the colored eggs have roots in Chabad history, but you're supposed to eat the eggs.
Yes.
And you color them with And there's a thing that shows how to color them with onion peels.
Yeah.
That's what I said, yeah.
I can say that.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, I didn't hear you say
Yeah, that's
Why-
part of the research I did. At any
Yeah.
rate, let's
Why
go.
are
Yeah, Judith?
why are eggs associated with mourning?
I'll send you your check later, okay, for asking that question. Thank you. I'm so glad you asked. So the reason why hard-boiled eggs are associated with mourning, and likewise brown lentils, is because they are round. They're completely round, and in the Hebrew they say it doesn't have a mouth. And in other words, there's no opening at all. And because of that, it symbolizes mourning, because when you are in deep, deep grief, you have no way of expressing yourself adequately. No matter how you cry, no matter how you try to express your pain, it never really expresses the real grief you feel. And that's why hard-boiled eggs and brown lentils are considered mourning food.
But they're not circular.
Well, but they're round.
Yes.
Part of the bottom
And-
part is round. The top part is a little bit more
And, but not-
rounded.
yeah,
Wait,
but
there-
there's no
wait, wait,
corner.
wait,
It's still round. It's
Wait,
still-
wait. They're talking about the yolk. Aren't they talking about the yolk and not the
No.
out?
No.
There's no end.
Okay.
There's no
Remember,
beginning, no end.
okay, the way they're saying it in the Hebrew is it doesn't have an opening. It doesn't have a mouth, is what it's saying. That's what you find in the sources. Just as we don't have a mouth to express the deep mourning that we feel. The deep
There's
sorrow.
no spot for an umbilical cord. There's no
Yeah.
no belly button. There's no anything.
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
thought it had referred to the round yolk.
No. I mean, it's a
I'm mistaken. Thank you.
okay. No. It was a good guess, and the yolk certainly is round. But no, they're hard boiled, as well, which is also round, hard boiled eggs. But no, it's talking about the shell and the fact that in order to get to the egg, you have to crack it. I suppose. I don't know. But what it says is it has ein lo peh. It does not have a mouth. Talking about expressing adequately one's feelings.
Lentils
deep
aren't
sadness.
completely round either.
All right, let's go to the share. We'll go to the screen share. And here we go. So here we start, we've had all these restrictions on the cohanim, and now we're having in some ways the rationale. What's the rationale? Kedoshim yu leloheghem. They shall be sanctified to their God. So again, this word kadosh is an interesting word, and we translate it as sanctified, which in English isn't so clear either. But it has the idea of, I remember back in rabbinical school, our liturgy professor translated kadosh as special, unique. That's associated with the word kadosh, that it has a special, it's talking about a spiritual quality, but it also has the idea of devotion. So for example, when a woman and a man are betrothed, we talk about kiddushin, that they have a unique relationship. So this word kadosh also has the association of unique. It also has the association of transcendent. For example, when we say kadosh, 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 Hashem tzvaot, v'lo chol haaretz kavodo. So that, in other words, that God is so distinguished, so unique, so transcendent. And it's the opposite of kadosh in that context is kavod. Kavod, where it talks about the presence of God, it uses the term kavod Hashem. And there it's talking about transcendence. So at any rate, that's the reason for this. They are supposed to have a unique relationship to their God. V'lo yechalalu, so that they not profane, right? They shouldn't desanctify Shem Elokehem, the name of their God. And the word shame, just like name in English, refers also to reputation. So it does in Hebrew as well. Why? So why do they have to be? So there's a further rationale. Ki et hishe Hashem, because the fire offerings of Hashem, lechem Elohehem, literally it's, although it's lechem we generally translate as bread, also by association we say food of their God, he makrivim, they present, vahayu kodesh, and they should be themselves sacred. So this one sentence in so many ways explains all that's been going on, that they have to act in this unique kind of way, all of which show us a devotion to their service to God. So here we go with it. So the question is, Kadoshim Yihiyu, they shall be sacred. So what's this force of this word Yihiyu in the Hebrew? And Rashi explains, and this is based on the Torah cohanim, the Sifra, al korcham, against their will. In other words, they are forced, yakdishum beit din. The court shall make sure that they are sanctified. It isn't, well, whatever you like. But by saying Yihiyu, they shall be, right? Really, whether they want to or they don't, they have to be. As a Cohen, the moment you take on the name Cohen or the position of Cohen, you have to be sanctified. It's not a, well, whatever I feel like doing. It's that serious. B'chach, in this matter. And there are other explanations as to where, but so in effect, what's going on now, because now we're going to be told the prohibited marriages that a Cohen has to be concerned about. And what we're saying is that, I can tell you, it's going to come up, which essentially it's going to say that the Beit Din, that the court can in fact inflict punishment on the Cohen to the point where he has to divorce the woman. So again, where are the priorities? And I realize, in our culture, that's a tough one to swallow. Isha Zonah, a woman who is, Zonah generally means a prostitute, okay? V'chalala, well, we already had the term Chalal. So, well, Rashi may explain it, but presumably we're talking about a woman who is the child of a forbidden union between a Cohen and a woman he's forbidden to marry. Lo yikachu, they should not take in marriage, in other words. V'isha grusha me'isha, and a woman who is divorced from her husband, lo yikachu, they shall not, again, take in marriage. Ki, because kadosh hu lelokav, he is to be sanctified to his God. Let's take a look at the Rashis. Okay, back in here. Zona. So what do we mean by zona? Liznot means to go astray, really. It has more to do with that. And here we go. Sheniv Allah, she's had intercourse. The Ilat Yisrael, with regards to just an Israelite, Ha'asur la, who is forbidden for her to marry, forbidden to her in marriage. So it's not being taken as a prostitute here. It's being understood that she has moved away from the accepted norms, from the taboos of Torah law. And he gives an example, kagon chayve kritut. So for example, those marriages where the punishment is kritut. The Torah lists forbidden marriages, okay? So for example, if she'd had relations with her brother or her father, or as I said, a person whom she is forbidden to have relations with. Or Netin. A Netin is a Gibeonite, and I need to explain that. Oh, I need to go back and explain kritut. Those, in other words, where the punishment is kritut. The word karet literally means to cut off or to cut. And it is a punishment that's given in the Torah and understood. It's not defined necessarily in the Torah, but there are two interpretations. One is cut off. Idea of being cut off is, and this is tough stuff. I tell you right ahead, fair warning, that it either means premature death or it means without children. In other words, your line is being cut off. So those are the two interpretations of karet.
Does it,
Yeah, go
does
ahead.
it involve physical cutting
No,
of a
no.
person?
No, it is considered a divine punishment. It is not one that is administered by a court or by human agency. It's left as a divine punishment. And we need to understand that it is not, what do you call a relationship that goes both ways? So for example, 1 and 3 is equal to 3 and 1. It's not that kind of relationship. And I can't remember how you define that particular relationship. In other words, just because a person dies young doesn't mean they're being punished. And just because a person doesn't have children doesn't necessarily mean they're going through karet. There's no, the inference doesn't go both ways. Okay. Okay. Netin, give you.
But would the person have any social? Would there be any social repercussions like a harem or excommunication?
No.
Not being part of the community. No.
Nothing that I have read. Nothing that I have read. Possibly, I'm going out on a limb here, that possibly there's a reason for this, and that is because it might involve sins that are very private, that no one else would know about. But no, there's no community, there's the responsibility or repercussions that I know of. I mean, admittedly, if that were found out and people knew the person had done it, well, that's the way people are, that can be very judgmental. But there's no Torah law that says that the person needs to be treated that way. So in some ways, this has to do between us and our maker. But there actually is a tractate, by the way, a tractate in the Mishnah called Kritut. And I believe it lists all those sins for which the punishment of karet is listed, is given.
But the problem would be that the Cohen who marries her,
Mm-hmm.
he's not supposed to marry her.
He is
But
not.
how would he know that he's not supposed to marry her?
Well, let's put it this way. Before marriage is a legal thing. And in fact, it's a responsibility to find out about the person you're going to marry. And you know that within the Orthodox community, yichus is very, very important. In other words, what's your family? What is your family like? What's the status of your family, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, obviously, if he didn't know at the time and he got married, well, he's not intending to commit a sin. He didn't know, right? But if he finds out later on that this is in fact the case, that she's a chayevet kritut, then he would have to divorce her.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, I think the priest, the cohanim, can only marry a virgin.
No, that's only the high priest. Only the high priest.
High.
Yeah, that's not a regular priest. A regular priest
Oh.
is allowed to marry a widow.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Okay, well, we're here to
Widow.
learn. All right.
How did somebody become the high priest?
They were elected by their fellow priests.
Aaron. Yeah.
Okay, so could they have already been married in the first place and it didn't really matter? And then
That's a
maybe?
great question.
Or is it somebody you're wanting young so you can have them for a long, long time?
Correct. And I would imagine that might go into their being designated as a high priest. Okay, that if it's not that a high priest could not be elected if he were married. Okay, but I would think
Not like the Pope.
No, that's the interesting thing, right? That
Yeah.
we do not promote celibacy. No, but I would say that, let's suppose as a priest, this man had married a widow, okay?
Mhm.
Then, and
He
he
wouldn't
was
be
out-
eligible, but
I
right.
think he would still be, I don't know that he would not be eligible, because it says the high priest must marry a virgin. So only if he actually becomes a high priest would he have to marry a virgin. So I mean, this is a great question, which I cannot answer definitively. But I'd say, you could understand the Torah to mean that as long as he's a high priest, he has to marry a virgin. But if he's married when he becomes a high priest, it's a done deal. He wasn't a high priest when he married this woman. So I don't know. I mean, obviously you could argue the other way too. My point is that you can argue both ways, and that maybe he could not become a high priest if he had married a widow, and that's certainly possible. But if he were married, he could certainly become a high priest, because they're all the women he can legitimately marry as a priest. So a Netin, a Gibeonite. So you need a little bit background for this. There's a really interesting story in the book of Joshua that when the Israelites were going in and conquering the land of Canaan, there was a tribe, a Canaanite tribe, that was frightened and did not want to have to encounter the Israelites in battle, with the possibility of them being wiped out. And so they sent some of the elders, and they wore torn clothing and worn out shoes and went to see Joshua. And they said, listen, we come from a very distant country, but we want to make peace. We want to sign a treaty with you, et cetera, and make sure, et cetera. And Joshua didn't investigate it. And in fact, they agreed to sign this agreement. This is all written in the book of Joshua. And then later on, they discovered these people were neighbors. They were Canaanites, but they'd made, and I think this is the point of the story, they had made a commitment. And so they needed to honor the commitment. And so they went to this tribe and they talked to the heads of the tribe of the Gibeonites, and they said, you did this under false pretenses. You made this agreement under false pretenses. And on the one hand, we gave you our solemn word, and we're going to keep our word, but you are going to now become hewers of wood and drawers of water. You're going to now, as a result, because you made this under false pretenses. And essentially the Gibeonites also, they were known as Netinim, and they were not permitted to marry an Israelite. An Israelite cannot marry a Netin. And if, pardon?
Were they permitted to worship their pagan gods though, still?
Well, good question. I would think not on the land of Israel, but if they wanted to go off to McDonald's and get a cheeseburger, I think that would be okay. Okay.
Yeah.
They were not Israelites. They were not Israelites. Now, there's a good question, and Golda, I'll anticipate your question by saying, can a Gibeonite convert to becoming an Israelite? And I cannot answer that question. It sounds to me like it should be possible, but maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. Or mamzer, or a mamzer. And a mamzer is, our definition of bastardy is different from the Christian understanding of bastardy. Bastardy in Jewish law is not the child of a non-marriage in that sense. Okay? In other words, born out of wedlock is not a definition of bastardy. It has to do with a child that is born from a consanguineous relationship or out of adultery or something like that. That's the definition. Chalal.
What's a consanguineous relationship?
Marrying your brother.
Okay, let me ask you a question about the conversion, the thing that you just brought up, and you don't have to answer it now if it's too long or sidetracky. But when you're talking about can a Gibeonite convert, well, like let's say a Jewish person were to convert to something else.
Yes.
And if they had a Jewish mother,
yes,
technically they're still considered a Jew.
Correct.
So maybe if a Gibeonite converted, even though he takes the Jewish religion, he's still considered a Gibeonite.
Yes, that is a possibility. But the truth is, I think this particular law, okay, there's a principle that says Yisrael afal pi shechata Yisrael hu, which means in Israel, though he sins, is still considered an Israelite. And that is understood. The context where you find that statement is precisely a case where a Jew converts out of Judaism, takes on a different religion, he is considered to have sinned, but he has not lost his status as an Israelite. So that, as I understand, is unique to being Jewish, that once you become an Israelite, you will always be an Israelite. But you will therefore face consequences of non-Israelitish behavior. That if you choose to do that while your status as an Israelite, by the way, even
Change your parentage.
Yeah.
When you convert, you change who your parents are.
By the way, to be a mamzer, you have to be an Israelite. There's no such thing as a non-Israelite mamzer. How can I put it? Only Israelites are mamzers.
Okay. I know someone whose father called them a mamzer, and I think that is the worst thing a person could ever call anybody.
Yeah.
Especially your father.
Yeah.
Who was your
When
father.
they get angry,
when
they're angry, they do that.
Yes, the father was insulting himself. Yes.
And his wife, and
yes,
and just awful. It was awful.
It is pretty bad.
I got a question.
One second, please. Give me a second. I want to mark the place because I heard the chime, so I have to. 1 second, and I'm doing this here so we know where to start tomorrow. Hopefully, it'll be there.
Okay.
Interesting. It just pulls it up from the other place, wherever it was before on the previous page. That's where we're starting tomorrow.
We haven't finished the Rashi.
I know we have.
That's where he's marking it.
I know. I'm marking it tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that it does. I don't want to start something.
That's okay. This could go over to the next day. Easy.
I have a question for conservative rabbi.
Yes.
Okay. What if you can marry a man marries a man, and a woman marries a woman? Is that legally okay on conservative? I know Orthodox, they say no. I don't get it. In the Torah, God says you can't marry a man and live and have relationships with another man, or a woman marry a woman.
All right.
It doesn't say that.
No, it doesn't say anything about.
Doesn't say anything about women.
Doesn't say
about marriage.
Okay. So within conservative Judaism, there's a much more liberal approach towards same-sex relationships. Okay, there's a much more liberal and understanding approach towards that. Does it mean a marriage? Not necessarily. But to say that it's a legitimate relationship within conservative Judaism, it's considered a legitimate relationship. Okay, and in fact, no names mentioned. I performed a ceremony between two women, and when we discussed the ceremony, we agreed that it wasn't going to be a traditional Jewish ceremony, but that we were going to take some elements of it and integrate it into the ceremony, but that it wasn't going to be, a typical marriage ceremony between a man and a woman. And that's how we handled that. And my sense also was that this was about relationships and about being close and companionship. And that was essentially the issue going on here. Okay. That's how I understood it. And we actually did. It's the one time I ever did such a ceremony, was asked to do it. And I was honored to be asked, frankly.
But Harlan, the Torah text does not mention gay marriage. It talks about intercourse between two males.
And what Harlan needs to understand is it only talks about two males. It does not talk about women.
And it doesn't talk about marriage.
No, it does not. Not in that regard.
If you lay with a man,
yes.
It's abdominal. God doesn't like that.
Okay.
It's the spilling of seed God doesn't like.
Well, it does say
really.
It does say Mishkaveh Isha. By the way, it's last week's Torah portion.
Yep.
And it talks about the lyings. Mishkav is to lie down. The lying downs plural of a woman. Okay, so that there's an understanding within Judaism that there are two ways. There's both types of intercourse. Okay, and again, when it comes to marriage, even very traditional Jewish law feels that this is a very intimate thing between two people, between a husband and a wife, and that even though it doesn't encourage the rectal kind of thing, it doesn't encourage it, but nevertheless, if this is something that's important for the intimacy of this particular couple, that's their business. And
How
frankly,
come?
okay, 1 second, Harlan, we're gonna have to stop. It's a little after 8. And
Okay.
you're asking good and important questions. They're sensitive questions, and they're questions that a lot of people, I'm sure, have on their minds. My sense is this: for one, we've made this issue of homosexuality and blown it out of proportion, okay, and been very unfair about it. Because my feeling is that when it comes to these kinds of things, this is my personal feeling, is that the Torah is wanting us to act modestly. And these are very personal things, and why homosexuality should be singled out as opposed to adultery, okay, or child molestation,
Yeah.
okay? Why should homosexuality be singled out is totally unfair, okay? And it comes down to our own, this is something, your own personal relationship with your creator and how you feel. And just to say that what we are looking for is modesty, okay? And I'm gonna stop the conversation right there because it's time to start. And I hope this is helpful, okay? So
Bye all.
take care.